started his journey back in 2019 of RBI Grade B. But after then, Destiny had some other plans and he got through his CAT examination and joined IIM Ahmedabad. He worked in prestigious investment banks and consultancy firms. But you know how they say the heart wants what it wants. He then started again preparing for RBI Grade B examination. In 2022 cycle, he could not give his mains examination because of the prior work commitments. But then in 2023, he came with a bang and now he has cleared this examination. So we will understand more about his roller coaster journey with himself only. So today we have in a success story series, Mr. Siddharth. I welcome you, sir, on EduTap platform and heartiest congratulations from our team on the big achievement.
Thank you, ma'am, and thank you, EduTap, for inviting me to share my strategy on the platform.
Right. So sir, there's a lot to learn from your journey as like I would say you had everything. Like you passed out from IIM. Before that you were from IIT. So definitely you had a lot of good opportunities outside this government job domain, if I would say. But then again, you wanted to be part of RBI and definitely you have become part of it. So definitely we will understand more about your journey. But initially I think the aspirants would want to know about how you actually about your education qualification and how you decided to prepare for RBI Grade B examination.
I graduated in 2018 from IIT Roorkee in mechanical engineering, and I appeared for RBI in 2019 for the first time. And I got to know about the exam through my cousins who were actually preparing for government examination. I joined a consulting firm, and at that year, I could not clear the prelims cutoff for RBI. And because I was actually also preparing for CAT together with RBI, because in the prelim, some sort of overlap is there. I cracked CAT and joined IIM Ahmedabad in 2020. During my journey at IIM Ahmedabad, I interned with an investment bank, and post completion, I returned back to consulting and I appeared for RBI again. And this time I cleared the prelims, but I could not appear for mains because I was posted somewhere else, and my examination center was in New Delhi. I was posted in Bangalore. Then at that point, I felt that maybe I need to, give my last attempt or a full-fledged try at RBI and get through the exam. So I started seriously preparing for RBI examination in February 2023. And this time I was fortunate enough to crack through all the stages
Right.
of
So,
RBI.
sir, like as you were preparing, you started your journey from 2019, right? And then you ended up in a good corporate world. And after that, even in 2022, as you just said, that you could not appear for the mains due to the work commitment. So, like, didn't you ever feel like why are you approaching for RBI? Like you already have everything, and even maybe somewhere the universes don't want you to go further with it, and that's where they are creating just obstacles. So what was that driving force for you that no, I have to clear this examination, I have to go for RBI?
I mean, it all started in 2019 when I got to know about it superficial level, that it's a good government job. The perks are, better than other government jobs, and you get to experience working with India's central bank and be part of the strategy making. But I think maybe I agree with your point that, in the case of initial obstacles, one does get the thought in mind that maybe the universe is conspiring me to stay back in the same path and continue with the corporate. But I think it was also in a way to tell me that maybe I was not ready to join the organization back then, and maybe I needed to taste some other experiences to, be in a mature mindset that I am fully clear in my head that I want to join a government job rather than working with corporate. So my corporate experience helped me understand the working of corporate investment banks, and then make a, fully aware decision that where am I heading to.
Right.
Also, during my investment banking tenure, I got to know that, any decision that RBI makes has cascading effects on the financial industry, and not only financial industry, on the overall growth of economy. So, I got to taste the, and authority of RBI working with an investment bank. So I got immensely impressed by the power it wields. So it also augmented my desire to, get into India Central Bank.
Right. Why to just follow the rules when you can create them? Or you can be
Yeah,
a part of which create these rules,
decision
right?
making.
So that's very, yeah, that's very interesting. You can say motivation or drive that one can have, right? To be the part of the organization who is actually in the creation of the rules which everybody else it follows in the economy, right? Okay, so this is how like you started preparing, and then like you started in 2019, and then in again 2022 you appeared for the examination, so there was definitely some gap in between. So when you again started, did you have to start from the scratch? And before that, I would want to tell all the aspirants, if you're looking for the very first time any RBI interview, that there happens three phases. In phase one, which is a qualifying phase, means its marks does not get counted in the final merit list. We have quants, reasoning, English. Quant is basically mathematics, reasoning, English, and then we have general awareness that comes. Questions from that comes, and we have to clear sectional cutoff also, and then there is overall cutoff also that we have to clear. In phase two, we have three subjects. We have ESI, economic and social issues, FM, finance and management, and then we have descriptive English. All three exams. In ESI FM, it is descriptive plus objective, and English is all descriptive, and then we have finally we have interview. So then again asking you the question, that for then you when again started, so you have to start from scratch, or maybe because you had some prior preparation, so it somehow it helped you during the preparation.
I mean, I will break it down into two parts. For the phase one part, ultimately three-fourths of the paper was very similar to the CAT exam. So when I appeared for the first time, when I got to know about my marks, I found out that I was lacking in general awareness part. So the in my next attempt, what I tried was that even if I, do not prepare much on quant and reasoning, I should at least focus my effort on my weakness, that is awareness part. So this thing changed in my second attempt, that I tried, seriously learning about the affairs and cramming up the PDFs. The second part would be about the phase two kind of mindset. So basically, first is, getting to know about the past year questions. Getting to know what exactly are they asking in phase two. Uh, so one can crack the pattern also, and also get an intuitive feeling that possibly these are the, macro themes around which RBI possibly ask question. So phase two preparation was kind of, built in the back of mind that ESI would be linked to current affairs, and the finance and management part could be broken down primarily into management, which is a very static portion, in finance, which is also, very heavily linked by affairs part. So that's
Mm-hmm.
how I strategized my preparation for the second and third attempt.
Right. Okay, so we will understand more about this in detail. So we'll start off with phase one and the sources, because aspirants that would definitely would want to know like how you prepared. First, like and as you have experience of cracking both CAT examination as well as RBI. So, sir, if you want to compare, what would you say that the level of the quant and reasoning that comes in RBI, is it similar to that of the CAT level, or is it lower than that?
I think first of all, the number of questions with on the parameter of number of question, CAT is definitely asks less number of questions compared to RBI given in that time frame. In terms of complexity, CAT questions are very comprehensive in nature, in which they kind of involve concepts from two or three topics together built in one particular question. Whereas in the case of RBI, the questions are many, but the concept they touch are very, I would say level N minus one. But
Okay.
I think over the years, RBI has definitely changed the difficulty level. So now the thing is that in both CAT and RBI, one thing remains common is to identify easy set of questions. So I remember in my second attempt, I tried solving all of them in quant because quant was relatively easier during those times, at least in my first attempt in 2019. So people were scoring more than 25 out of 30, which was a very good score during that time. But I think over the years, for example, in my last attempt, the quant was very tough in that the cutoff level it could easily be interpreted through fall in cutoff levels for quant as well. So the strategy remained to identify easy questions and not get stuck on difficult question and take it on ego that why am I not able to solve this question and waste time there. So strategy remains the same for both the sections in CAT as well as RBI to select easy questions and to avoid falling into the trap of difficult ones.
Right. So for quant reasoning English, did you just relied on mock test and practice sets?
For reasoning, I think I I put in a slightly more efforts because reasoning part was also not my strongest area during my CAT preparation as well. But one advantage which RBI offers, which CAT didn't, was that in CAT you have to solve like complete set to crack 4 questions. But in
Hmm.
RBI, the advantage was that there are certain number of individual questions. Rather, there is a mixed bag. So there are set based questions and there are individual based questions. So tracking those individual based question in that time frame was my strategy. And if I could spot a easy set there, that kind of stuff to sharpen my skills in reasoning, I tried solving sectionals of
Hmm.
CAT exam to get a fair bit of understanding and to get my brain back into working action. Because the last time I attempted CAT and this time I attempted RBI, there was a difference of 3-4 years, and definitely it impacts your performance during the exam as well.
Right. So would you somewhere would you say that CAT preparation, if somebody is preparing for CAT, somehow it is going to help them in RBI as well?
Yeah, the fundamentals are pretty much the same. Because ultimately, time, speed, distance concept won't change for RBI as well as CAT. So
Right.
the fundamentals remain the same, and more or less the strategy also remains the same. That in order to crack the exam, you need to have built a strong foundational base, and then be efficient at spotting easy or sitters during the exam.
Right.
So I think it definitely helps.
Right. And so if we talk about general awareness, now there's a lot of data that we have to cram, and there's a lot of diversified information that we have to learn, be it general awareness schemes, then there are reports, then there are RBI circulars that comes. So there's a lot of there just in general awareness only. So how did you approach for this particular section?
I think the first thing I started was, I think it's EduTap YouTube channel that posts past year phase one, also memory-based questions,
Hmm.
because the question paper is not, directly available anywhere. So at least to get a fair bit of understanding of what kind of themes they are asking in phase one. Whether, because earlier they used to say that it is very banking focused exam. So even if you're reading a fair, then you should focus on financial and economic type of questions. But over the years, I think they have also diversified. So getting that clarity in mind that it's not like 80% banking affairs and 20% non-banking affairs. I think it has shifted to 60% banking affairs and 40% still non-banking affairs over the years. So that kind of clarity you get by watching the past year question papers video. And the second strategy was that even while reading, because you mentioned the point that data points. So I think brain has, its own limitations. And also if, because if, for example, in the case of GDP forecast, the multiple agencies, project their GDP forecast and the differences are very minuscule. For example, if IMF is projecting 6.3% and some other agency is projecting 6.8%, when that
Hmm.
question comes in the exam, it's very difficult to delineate because it's all messed up in our head that what exactly agency was projecting. So in order to cut through the clutter, I think we need to focus only on the important topics, and to get to that point where you get to decide what is important and what is not important is majorly driven by the trend in the past year papers. Because if the RBI is constantly focusing on inflation and growth related metrics, then you understand that okay, so any report that mentions any remark about inflation is considered to be important in the case of RBI. Or for example, Niti Aayog is publishing reports, then you understand the Niti Aayog, whatever reports it has published in the last 1 year, I think the
Hmm.
important conclusions from that report are very important for both phase one and phase two sort of exam.
Right. So like as you said, that brain also has a limited capacity.
Mm,
So maybe for some days you might forget the data. So were you
mm.
self-critical about yourself at that moment, and were you thinking, यार इससे अच्छा तो corporate world ही था, I should, why am I doing all this, torturing myself and all that?
I mean, it's a every day you have to, go through that cycle of sinusoidal curve in which one point of the day you feel that you have mastered the art, and on 4 hours later you feel that you don't know anything. So it's a very regular day process, and I think during the process of preparation, you actually, undergo so many cycles that ultimately you realize that anything you remember, you can't guarantee that eventually it will come to help you in the exam. So you go in with this aim that, anything that comes before me, I need to learn it up. And then, you set low expectations that,
Right.
I'm not extracting any utility from it. I agree with this fact that during the exam, uh, it's because the examination pressure is different from the one you are reading. Because I remember that while reading the PDF, you will tend to go deep dive into, descriptive metrics and understand the conclusion. But in the exam, what they ask is they might be asking simple questions, and you might feel, okay, so I don't know who published that report. You might know all about the conclusion, but you might have missed a
Hmm.
very critical point there. So you can't, these are some uncontrollable factors which go into the
Hmm.
process. And rather than thinking all day long about it, I think it is better to be in the moment and, study or be in the moment actually, rather than, overthink about it.
Right, right. That's very beautiful statement you have said, that be in the moment instead of just worrying about the things. Right. So sir, like first you watched our channel and you analyzed like what is the demand of the examination. Then after that, what were the sources that you referred for, looking at the data or maybe the news?
I think first and foremost, because first to get the clarity that there are some reports which are important for both phase one and phase two. I mean, the phase two descriptive questions can be asked from that report. So I think one was report PDF, which EduTap publishes, and then is the schemes
Hmm.
tap something. So basically, building an understanding that you understand the scheme and you understand the important metrics, which will help you in phase one, but will certainly help you more in phase two because in the descriptive answer, you want your answer to be differentiated.
Hmm.
So, regularly revising those PDFs because more or less all the schemes or the reports that have been published in 1 year will remain static more or so. There might be
Hmm.
small changes in upcoming months, but most of them are staggered in a way, or most of them, don't have much updated information apart from the growth forecast or anything else. The observations and conclusions majorly remain the same. So, first thing is that, using these two PDFs, which I think is a must for phase one and phase two. For phase one, especially because of the current affairs,
Hmm.
the general perception is this that they usually ask 3 months or 4 months of general affairs before the exam date. So, you possibly monthly compilations of current affairs. That certainly helps. But I think there's just too much data about floating around these monthly affairs because if I download one monthly affair magazine, it has about 100 odd pages, 120 odd
Hmm.
pages. And then if you,
Hmm.
add it up, it amounts to 500 odd pages. So to,
Hmm.
scrap through that material and to identify important things and then remembering it and then revising it's a very kind of, uh, it's a very repetitive process. So
True.
I think one thing would be that in when you're reading through the monthly current affairs, at least you should be very conscious enough and selective enough. This information is not very relevant to my
Hmm.
course of preparation, and this information is very critical, and I should mark it down and revise it before the day
Right.
of the exam, and so on and so forth.
Right, and definitely that would be done if you have done proper analysis of the previous year question
Previous year
paper.
papers. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So for phase one, you followed, and did you follow any marathon session also before the examination?
Very beneficial. I think it certainly increase your marks by 5 or 6 because ultimately, whatever you hear in the last 2 days And when you know look at the option and suddenly the name strikes. For example, most of these questions about in that format, that which person has received a particular award or which
Hmm.
organization has received a particular award for this particular reason. I mean, these are very close options if you haven't read, because they will ask a corporate person and they will show like Narayan Murthy, Mahindra, and so on and so forth.
Hmm.
So during the exam, you have to, even if you have to decide one, that you get very confused in your mindset. But if you have read the marathon and you know that, okay, so I heard somewhere that Mahindra has received a
Yeah.
particular award, then you go with that intuition.
So
So
that fits in your subconscious mind.
that fits in your subconscious mind.
Right, right. Okay, so that was for phase one. And now if we talk about phase two. So we'll start one by one about the sources you referred and how you practice. But on like if in a cumulative way, if you have to start, I want to discuss on the descriptive writing. So like descriptive writing, how you approach the basic descriptive writing, or you had some different approaches for different section. Maybe is there some overall strategy that you had for writing a descriptive answer? And yes, added to
Yeah,
that, I would also want to ask, did you follow the word limit?
I think the first part of the question, that having a specialized strategy for, let's say, a finance-based descriptive question and then a different strategy for economic-based descriptive question, yes, because if you look at the management-based questionnaire, most of the questions are very static in nature, because
Hmm. Hmm.
ultimately it's all theory.
Hmm.
So ocean framework won't change, or let's say the management principles won't change. So you have to be thorough with the management principles. What more I could do was that, suppose if I'm using a ocean framework kind of answer, then if I'm laying out example, then I can use more concurrent examples to substantiate my point. For example, if I'm using Elon Musk example as a personality, or maybe personality of other world leaders, to substantiate why do I feel that that person falls in that particular trait, personality trait, and then
Hmm.
justify something like he bought this company, or the company was going through this crisis or this tussle. So that was the thing which I had in mind, to add some more nuance to my static based answer in finance, whether the
By
economic based
giving some
answers are
current
by
examples.
giving some
By
current based examples.
hmm.
For the economic, because the questions are very relevant to the happenings around the world, and I think the economic is much more dynamic in nature, because
Hmm.
a lot more organizations are now focusing towards climate finance. Each year there are multiple summits which are happening, multiple reports which are being published. So I think I try to understand what the examiner, or as you say, the demand of the question. So if they're referencing any report and they're asking us to write about the conclusions of that report, so I think one if one gets the understanding that this is the overall theme of the question. For example, this is the climate finance of the theme. If you color your answer in a way that you are using data metrics, let's say
Hmm.
from any other report as well. For example, India needs X percentage of GDP expenditure to meet its climate goals. So that X% would be in a ballpark range, which will
Hmm.
be
Hmm.
almost similar across the reports, and most of the reports actually refer to it, because
Hmm.
it's the most important figure, that this is the amount of investment that is required. So any report they ask, and summarizes the conclusions and summarizes the observation from, let's say, any other adjacent report, that would also give more value to the answer, that at least you are
Hmm.
aware of not only about this thing but also about this thing. Because with descriptive you have that leeway. They
Hmm.
ask you a very open-ended question, and then they want you to touch upon, let's say, X dimensions or Y dimensions, which you decide during the paper how much you're
Hmm.
comfortable with. On the second part of the question, that was about the word limit, I think no. In most of my answers, if I take an average, it should be around 80%. 80% of
Okay.
the word limit I was able to match.
Okay. And while typing the descriptive answers, so did you like had any approach like you'll go paragraph wise or point wise, or how did you frame your answers?
So one, I think, learning which I took from my experience was that I took things for granted. I thought that it would be normal as if I'm typing on my keyboard at home. So there are certain changes, because if you want to make a point, then you have to, press space bar and press enter bar. There's some combination there, and
Okay.
I was not very familiar with. So when I was writing my first answer, I could not actually change it to a point or move it to the next sentence. So I ended up writing paragraphs only because I didn't want to waste time. So for
Yeah.
example, instead of putting across 10 points, I put across 3 paragraphs, because I was not able to understand how to get to the next point, and there was a lot of put backspace
Mm.
back there, and then enter, then space, and then, because I thought I was wasting time. So I think it was more of a technical glitch that made me
Mm.
write into paragraphs, and I continued with it. I think in
Right.
almost all my finance and management answers, at least in the first half of the session, the first paper, I ended up writing all paragraphs.
Right. So as you were saying that you did not wanted to write in paragraph, but yes, you had to. But somehow it worked in your favor. So I believe it's more about the quality of the content. Of course, the structuring is also there, but more than that, the quality of content, it is really it is required in the examination. Like a person, if he has to worry, should worry about content more than thinking of how to decorate the answer, I think.
I think I agree that, okay, so my example would be one off. Like I wrote
Hmm.
in paragraphs, and somehow I was able to, manage the cutoff well and something like that. I would say that it's a balanced perspective between quality and structure, because most of these examiners are, kind of checking so many papers during each day. So if they
Hmm.
don't look at any structure, they might feel, bit confused about what the person has actually written in the exam. So
Hmm.
structure actually, gives a perception that you know what you are talking about.
Right. So,
Descriptive mein examiner had to put in efforts to read your answer.
right. So did you follow any trick for that? So that even looking at the initial statement, the person would know, the examiner would know. So, did you follow anything for that?
I think that was the thing that I made
Hmm.
it in my mind, that to if I start any answer, I would start with any relevant data point. I would not give a very generic, start to my answer that climate finance is going to impact vulnerable and, let's say,
Hmm.
developing countries. So I want to put in that, these countries are lacking X percentage, investment is
Hmm.
not there, and so and so. So at least to give a sense that I'm writing a very well informed answer
Hmm.
in that sense. Also, during the course of my answer, I would just, try to, justify my arguments with a specific data point. And
Hmm.
that data point is actually linked to both current affairs, which I had actually studied. Anything that I remember, that fits the bill, or anything from schemes, reports, anything
Hmm.
that works to, justify your point.
Right. So see, whenever we study current affairs for phase one, and as you also refer to the PDFs, and many aspirant, because PDFs is handy because everything is in a precise manner, everything is present. But as you discuss in ESI also, current affair based questions are asked more, and even in descriptive English also, essays questions are on that line only. So how an aspirant should manage, because he is just reading the data points and precise information, but descriptive answer is more than that, right? So did you refer to editorials as well in for the references, or you had the basic understanding and you added more of the data points to validate your answer?
See, I think it also connects with my one of my previous answer, that brain has limited amount of information. So reading editorial actually opens up our mind. We come
Hmm.
across new dimensions which we haven't thought of. So,
True.
for example's sake, that we are only thinking about social, economical, political. So there might be any fourth dimension that we might be missing out. Suppose legal dimension. So upon reading editorials, we add up more nuance to our answers, or it helps us think in a particular way, which possibly these, because editorials are written by experts, so they know that, what is running uh, at the back of the mind of the government while, making the strategy. So definitely editorial help you, structure your answers in a better way. They add more nuance to your dimensions. And certainly while reading editorials, if, particular expert has quoted some number, and if you quote that expert in your answer, that definitely, brings more value addition to your answer.
Right.
So it works for preparation.
Right.
reading
And if
editorials.
we talk about ESI objective portion, so how
Yes,
like yeah, in that is that the current affair only that comes, or even we can expect some static question as well from the theoretical portion?
I think ESI is my general perception before the exam, and also I think post the exam remains almost the same, that it's very tough to predict like from what part of the course the questions are going to come. It
Hmm.
might happen that full paper is coming from UPI. I mean,
Hmm.
there's a strong possibility. There's a strong possibility that there's a full-fledged question on WTO, although it might happen that WTO is not in use. And for example, WTO, in one of the questions about WTO, they had asked about its foundational date. So even while it's not part of the dynamic syllabus, so if you haven't read about WTO in a static sense, then it's very
Hmm.
difficult to point out the date on which it was established. So for ESI, I think you need to have a very comprehensive strategy. So keep in mind about the static. So for example, if there are regulatory bodies, then the static part is very important. On what committee's recommendation it was established, in what year it
Hmm.
was established, what were its objectives. And the dynamic portion would be the recent reports of that committee, or the recent developments of that particular bank or particular entity. So you need to have a balanced view of that. While finance and management is much more static in nature, ESI is a mixed bag. You need
Hmm.
both static and dynamic. That's why it is more difficult to crack the objective part in ESI.
Right.
Uh,
So for ESI static as well as you have mentioned, for FM it's more of a static that comes. So what sources did you refer for the static portion of these subjects?
I think I purchased EduTap Phase 2 material, and the benefits was that they were they were like, it was a very comprehensive set of documents that was provided to me. So, for example, I have a separate note on WTO, which includes 4 pages on WTO. It covers almost all the aspects, static aspects to cover 100% of it, WTO. So, for example, World Bank, IMF. So, you have particular small notes on each of them. And also on the macroeconomic issues, you have a very concise form of notes for all of it. So, the dual benefit was that the static portion would be helpful in the ESI objective section, if any such question come, and the more or less on the macroeconomic part would be very beneficial in writing answers to your descriptive part, because in descriptive part you also have to connect with the history of the
Hmm.
issue. You can't just start with the contemporary take on it. So you have to throw some light on what was going on behind, before this issue came up.
Hmm.
So and the second piece of understanding was that while during that 20 odd days sort of period of preparation, you don't get too much time to start looking out for material and collecting material, organizing it at one place, and then
True.
revising all of it. So there's a fair bit of understanding and trust level added to it, that even if I cover 70-80% of this material, it should be sufficient enough to at least write something in the exam and crack it.
Hmm.
So this fair bit of understanding is also very important, that you don't need to waste time on collecting resources if you're getting it at one place.
Hmm.
That is much more beneficial.
That's that's true. And sir, if we talk about descriptive English, on what essays it comes in descriptive English. So are they somewhere in line with ESI and FM topics, or it's again very random thing that is happening in the society?
I think it's very linked to the syllabus. For example, there was one essay on climate and the second essay on management technique. So, for
Hmm.
one essay was very, very linked to ESI, and the second essay was kind of linked to FM part, which you
Hmm.
learn in managing stakeholder communication and stakeholder management. So, the essay gives you a leeway on which particular area you are strong at. Choose that essay and write a well-informed essay on that point. So when you're writing an essay, you require your knowledge from phase one and phase two. So English can't be prepared as a standalone, at least on standalone basis, because almost all the information that will get imported into your essay will eventually come from phase two and phase one study material. So
Hmm.
while working on phase one and phase two, you are eventually preparing for your English essay as well. Because I remember in my phase two, there was one question on climate, both in ESI as well as in essay. So, or if I tend to look at it, then 90% of the content would remain the same. Yes, definitely the structuring and the expression would definitely be different in essay, but the core content would be almost the same in both the answers.
Right.
So that was
So,
my strategy
okay.
to balance it out.
Okay, so that was for your phase two. And were you confident after phase two that you might be able to clear, and you started off with the interview, or you were skeptical and you waited for the result?
I think the first thing I did after my phase two exam was to wait a day and get to the answers of objective questions at least. And when I
Mm.
matched them up, I found out that I had made some terrible silly mistakes in my finance and management paper, which was touted to be easier this year. It was comparatively scoring this year. So I was around 10 marks or 12 marks behind many of my peers. So the average
Mm.
score, my score was pretty less in objective section. So I was kind of pinning my hopes on the descriptive section somehow because in RBI sort of exam, too much competition, 1 mark, makes a lot more difference. And then you are behind like you have made silly mistakes on 3, 4 easy questions. So that it's a very huge mistake to do in at least in an easy set of paper. Difficult set of paper
Mm.
like ESI, you understand that not many people are going to get very high score in that. But in an FM section, which is much more static in nature, and you make these silly mistakes that are going to cost you. So I was kind of not very sure, very confident of clearing my phase two exam. So I was waiting for the result. And RBI is an efficient organization. It publishes
Mm.
result in a very less amount of time. So that helped me, that helped me escape the trouble of overthinking for a
Right.
longer
So,
duration of
so
time.
did you share with your family that your exam was so and so, and it
No,
did
no,
not
no,
went that well?
no, I didn't. I didn't. I actually didn't. I, I thought that maybe, adding more to their trouble. And so I thought that,
Yeah.
okay, this is my perception of the exam. So if I'm, in anxiety, why should I put more people in anxiety?
Yeah,
You
that's
know,
true.
so
And
I thought that I'll
in
keep
fact,
it
I
to
want to
myself.
ask on that note, if that's okay, that when you came home for the preparation, so didn't your even parents they advised you or gave you second opinion that you're already well established? Why do you want to leave job and then then start with something new?
I think my parents were a bit understanding in a way that, they realized that I was not making a decision on my whim. So it was not like
Mm.
that I had, just heard of this exam, left my job and started this preparation. It was a very long duration of preparation involved in it. So I
Right.
had been aware of this exam for the last 3, 4 years. So
Mm.
so they had this view that okay, he must have thought of the pros and cons in his head. He's well aware enough that he can take this decision and proceed to go with it.
Right.
So so in that way I think they were supportive in that. So if you're taking the risk, and if you know that this is the cost to your risk, you're well aware of it.
Mm.
If it
Mm.
doesn't go down, at least you can't say that I was not aware of the amount of risk I was putting in this,
Yeah.
taking off from my job and sitting at home and preparing for this exam.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And was it like you had all your social media cut off and social gathering cut offs, or you try to manage both?
I think it's because I think it's first of all it has both pros and cons. So one thing, it acted as an outlet for me,
Hmm.
to get some kind of fair amount of beneficial distraction during the process. So I distanced myself off from Instagram, I think because it soaked all of your time, and the I was active on Twitter. So
Okay.
Twitter acted good for me uh, in that
Yeah,
sense.
because it's more of on the informational note.
On the
So
informational note, yeah.
yeah, so it's like you're distracting yourself, but then in that case also
At
you're
least at
getting to
least it
get
does
some
not give you the
information.
perception that you are wasting your time, because it might happen that you have read the views of so many experts
Yeah.
online. So it gives you a sense of illusion that you haven't
Yeah.
wasted any much time on scrolling through the Twitter.
Right. So, okay. So now when the result came and you finally saw your name and you were like, okay, so you have cleared phase two. So the next thing was to prepare for interview. So I want to ask, how much time did you get for the interview preparation, and then what was your next strategy regarding that?
Uh, I I think I got about roughly 2.5 to 3 months amount of time, months of time before between my declaration of result and my interview date.
Hmm.
And during that phase, you kind get of relaxed because you think that ultimately I will put in effort 1 month later or 2 months later into the whole process.
Hmm.
But it's a double-edged sword because you are active on Telegram or you're active on Telegram channels, and many people are going through the interview and they're putting their interview transcripts. So, you develop some notions in your head. Okay, so the board is asking questions along these lines. So these are the themes which are currently running.
Hmm.
And the problem is that, there's too much subjectivity because your profile is very, very different from other people profiles. So even if you develop conception that, this board member is asking this particular question, so I need to focus on this particular question. I think it makes your preparation bit narrow. So in my case, I didn't actually start just at the time of declaration of my result. I took my time off, and because I was also skeptical in my head, the reason was pretty clear that if I had cleared it, I must have cleared it on the margin. And to get the calculus right, I needed to score very high in interview marks to just to get through the final stage. So even
Hmm.
this fear was also at the back of my mind. If what if I don't perform average? What if I falter during the interview and so thing. So I think one was to make it clear in my head that this is nothing in my control uh,
Yeah.
on how this all process goes around. So what all can I control at that point in time was, focusing more on the information part or, strengthening my questions about my profile part. So I devoted my time on that uh, and, proceeded to prepare along that line of action.
Right. So for that, like the you referred to websites, or you were revising the notes that you have made for phase one, phase two?
The first thing I did was, RBI website. I think it's a very comprehensive resource. And for first bit of understanding is that when was RBI established, what was the act governing it, and what are the number of departments at RBI, which department do you primarily want to work with, and why do you want to work with, what functions does it, follow. So these are some kind of static questions which invariably get asked, and you need to be thorough with it because if you're not
Hmm.
thorough with them, ultimately it represents that you are not interested in this job. If you're not,
Hmm.
very well aware of the functioning of the organization you want to work with. So my first point of preparation strategy was to at least get thorough with these kind of aspect of RBI. The second interesting was reading and actually kind of started enjoying the speech section a lot because they were speaking on managing India's inflation in a certain time. The second was that why is there a loss of transmission in bank rates? Because we get an understanding, okay, so the repo is not getting converted to lending rate. This is a fair bit of understanding, but if someone from let's say deputy governor is speaking on that issue, so he's explaining it from a very layman term and form of speech, and he's explaining all the nuances attached to it. So get much more understanding, reading the speech part rather than just learning through the statements.
Hmm.
So why the core inflation is not coming down and why core inflation is such a risk. When you read monetary policy committee report, you understand that why a certain member is not very happy with the accommodation decision. What are his viewpoints? What are the minutes attached to it?
True.
So you at least get a very nuanced editorial kind of view on the issues revolving around. It's not very descriptive in nature, but it's very analytical in nature.
Hmm.
And so that's how it shaped my understanding of the issues, bringing them. Because phase one, phase two, you have already accumulated lot of information in your head.
Hmm.
I mean, you know about facts and figures, you know about certain reports, The phase three is more about connecting the dots.
Right.
Because they're referencing to so many reports and so many metrics in their speeches, your actually brain starts working around that why is he referring to this particular metric and where I had read this metric and what is the significance of this metric.
Right.
So I think much of my preparation went down there. reading through
And
speeches,
did
and
you have you appeared for any mock interviews as well?
that was another learning actually. I scheduled one mock, and I could not attend it due to some logistic issue, and I went for my interview like without taking any mock, and I think it's one of the most, it's, if not one of the most, it's still one of the most significant step in phase 3 one
Hmm.
should take. And it's not about taking one mock, it's about taking a number of mocks till you get comfortable to the idea of sitting, before a panel of six esteemed, members, and taking one question, because the questions can come from anywhere, and
Yeah.
more or less, calibration your uh, calibrating your decisions, and articulating your nuances better in front of the panel requires much more practice than what I
Hmm.
was thinking in my head. That I was thinking that maybe, you go into the interview and they ask the questions and tell them the answers, so and so forth.
Hmm.
So I think this part, if I were to repeat it again, I would again make it one of my top priorities to at least go through as many mocks as possible to get a fair bit of understanding.
Right. And if we talk about your interview, so was it more on the technical lines, or it was more on like RBI based, or maybe the job that you have done initially, or the random questions, or what sort of?
Uh, I think because of my MBA background, they made it explicitly clear that we are not going to ask the questions which are more on the technical or the descriptive way of lying, because you might already have covered it during the course of your MBA business. So
Hmm.
they started asking me questions more on the analytical lines. And analytical questions, however, they seem easy on the spot. That why is repo rate, we want to increase the repo rate. It's a very simple analytical question.
Hmm.
But the problem associated with these is because there are six members, there are six brains thinking on the spot
Hmm.
along with you. So any argument that you make, it can get countered at that very instant. And answering the repo rate is x% and answering why the repo rate is this percent are two different ball games altogether.
Yeah.
The second one actually gets much more difficult during the phase of interview, because it's more of a conversational type rather than, they ask me a question and I just answer it and then they move to the next question. So they are also putting in more data points into their answers. They're putting more arguments into their answers, and they expect me to, either convince them that my opinion is right, or disagree with them, something sort of a very well nuanced argument kind of thing, which
Hmm.
primarily happens during analytical questions. So my interview was 70-80% more analytical, and the first phase of the first part, or let's say the first 2-3 minutes or more on my academic credentials. Rest of the interview was very, very analytical and more focused on macroeconomic issue rather than simply asking about RBI structure and RBI rule. They were more on the macroeconomic scenarios in India.
Right. And during this time, was it like you were not able to answer any question?
Many times, many times. I think because I feel that there's a theory, right, that if you ask multiple number of whys to a particular statement, at one point you don't have an answer.
Yeah.
And that was the thing which was happening, which actually made me realize that my understanding of an issue could be superficial in a way. So this thing get unraveled in a mock interview where you get to identify your blind spots. So
Right.
something which you in the illusion that you know about something, and then in an interview, if somebody asks you two level deeper kind of question, you realize that you lack depth in understanding that issue. So
Right.
I think that was the point where I realized that I should have actually gone through the process of mock interview, identify my weak spots, and at
Hmm.
least not lead the interviewer to my weak spots. At least that much I could do.
Yeah.
Because when you are unprepared, or when you go into an interview when you don't have any strategy or whatever, you basically are yielding a large surface area for the interviewer to ask questions on. If you have some sort of clarity, you want the interviewer to lead in a way that they possibly keep asking questions on your strong points. But if you are not well aware of your strong points and weak points and you barge in there, then it's a very messy process, and they
Hmm.
can ask questions on each and every topic, and possibly at every instance you might say that, okay, sorry boss, I don't I don't have the required understanding right now. I need to look into it further.
Yeah.
So yeah, even these kind of things are very normal during the course of interview.
Right. So in a way we can say you get a little bit lucky that there was not much difference between your interview and the result. Otherwise it would have been very stressful. But then even those moments you get still you had few days after the interview. So were you like deciding to go back to corporate, or did you decided at that moment no that I have to go for another exam, maybe of RBI or maybe of some other examination? What was the duration that you were going through?
I think you said it correctly because my interview, happened in the first week of December and the result came out in the second week. So I didn't get too much time to overthink what went right and what went wrong in the process. And during that time also, I was kind of, waiting for the result to get over. For mentally preparing myself that okay, this year's cycle is over now, and I might need to shift on to the next year's cycle or plan my further course of action, whether I want to stay in this field or whether I want to return back to corporate. So yeah, so I was waiting for the decision to come. If the decision had not come in my favor, then I would have certainly made a hard decision whether I need to stop this whole process and return back to corporate, or whether I need to give myself one another try. So
Hmm.
I think the whole contemplating of my alternatives would have happened if I had not been selected, or if there had been a lot more gap between my interview and the result. So supposedly, if my interview had happened in September or maybe in October, then would have happened a lot more time, and I would have already made a decision back then. Result come what may or not, I'm already clear in my head that I want to go in or go out.
Right.
But
One thing I
I think
really in this interview I have felt is the calm composure and the clarity you have and very logical thinking that it's very clear that it happens. You forget the data. That's human mind. Okay, if I can't clear, I'll have some other options. My examination did not go well. I don't want to bother others with the same thought. So that's very clarity and the logical ability that you have, and definitely that must have helped you during the examination. Right. So now then finally the result came. So how was the thing at home?
when the result came. I started searching for my roll number and I couldn't find it. So
Okay.
I thought for a while that maybe I hadn't got, because actually my mind was rationalizing also. My interview was okay, average-ish. My
Yeah.
phase two didn't go well, so maybe I could not clear it. So
Hmm.
mind is a very tricky thing. You kind of rationalize everything. If you get selected, then you have these points that okay, got selected for these reasons, and if you
Yeah.
don't get selected, you don't get selected for these reasons. So at that point, I had thought that maybe, I would have scored low in
Hmm.
interview, and it was a very obvious kind of thing. So
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
was, but then I thought that, okay, let me just scroll through the PDF. Then I realized
Yeah.
that, okay, so it's an image kind of thing. So you have to scroll and find your number yourself. I found the number and I was pleasantly surprised by, because ultimately you get the realization that, you don't exactly know what is going on in interviewer's mind when he's asking
Hmm.
questions and what responses he's getting, how is he evaluating them. So there's a lot more subjectivity in interview and also a lot more subjectivity in the descriptive answers, because I think much of my progress through the stages can be credited to descriptive answers. Because if I
Hmm.
hadn't received at least more than average marks in descriptive answer, I wouldn't have cracked the phase two stage. So there's a lot more subjectivity, and preparing yourself for the subjectivity that even if you have written a very good answer, there's strong possibility that the examiner might have interpreted it wrong and might have given you
Yeah.
low marks, or even in the other case might also be true.
Hmm.
So you can work. So one thing, if I take my lessons from the whole process, would be like in the objective part, which is very controlled. You can actually be very specific about it. You get it right, you get it wrong.
Yeah.
There's no other way about it. Control that factor. Descriptive is very subjective in nature. So, pushing your, like, constantly thinking about it and, worrying about it, I think it's very difficult to, narrow it down. So these are the factors that really matter and these are the factors that don't really matter.
Yeah.
So I think preparing mind for it, uh, to understand the subjectivity which is involved in the whole process is very important.
Right. Right. Okay, so that was all about Mr. Siddharth journey of RBI Grade B, and so I'm definitely sure it is going to help a lot of aspirants. So at the end, if I would if you would want to say something to the aspirants, I would like to give you I would like to ask you for that.
I think it's overall, I think the life is much more longer. I think is one thing is this, and it's a tough process mentally. So I think I can't trivialize it, by saying that you don't need to worry or you don't need to, think about it because it's stupid. Eventually, everyone will think and everyone will worry. I mean, it's part of the human nature. But not exaggerating it or not exaggerating it in a way that don't have to constantly think about where I went wrong and be overcritical, which you mentioned, that overly critical of oneself, that maybe I'm not very strong in this area, I need to put a lot more efforts in this area, and maybe I'm not getting the required output. I think you need to have a balanced perspective in that,
Mm,
because there are lot many factors which are out of your control than the factors which are in your control. So at the end of the day, you are in a very low probability space working around, and getting to understand that everything can go right and everything can also go wrong in a way, despite how much thing train it. So I think one thing is need to have a very dedicated and very clarity in your mind that whatever you are doing it in the moment. You don't have
mm,
to think about the results and you don't have to think about what went wrong, what went right. I mean,
true.
that is all for post-match analysis. So during the match, you don't get time to, think which shot I want to play. You just play it. And then you
Yeah.
think after 4 or 5 years or possibly where I went wrong and where I went right.
Right.
I
That's
think it's a
truly
much more
said.
mental conditioning kind of thing is required.
Right, right. To even enter to a war game, you have to first mentally prepare yourself for that.
Correct.
Right. Okay. So thank you so much, sir, for joining and sharing your views. And I'm definitely sure it is going to help a lot of aspirants. And we wish you all the very best for your future endeavors.
Thank you, ma'am. And thank you, EduTap, for, giving me this opportunity. Really humbled to, address such a large group of community. It's kind of contributing back to the community in one way. Certainly feels
Right.
good. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.